So Greg has asked me to really talk about, and you'll note in the program, how do we educate veterinarians really from cradle to grave? And I'm going to expand that, and I want you to think maybe a little bit more broadly, how do we really do education cradle to grave, whether that's ourselves, whether that's future veterinary students, and probably much more importantly, our caregivers that take care of pigs every day. Much as Angela said, they're going to solve most of the issues that we have. We can help guide and move forward. But I'm going to challenge us to think very broadly today about how do we have a better path. The title today, I want you to think about one thing, Dr. Google. Put that in the back of your head as we go forward. Because I'm going to suggest that what we are doing today with respect to education, whether that's training our employees, whether that's creating high school students, whether that's creating undergraduates, or whether that's creating veterinarians, or maybe what we've done all day today and we're fixing to do for the next 3 days, is absolutely what we need to not be doing. As part of the educational industrial complex, or however you want to call that, we are not training to deliver what you need. But there is a better way at hand, and we're going to try to explore that today. How do we have a better process to actually create where we're at? So, I want to go back and tell a little bit of a story. And the title of this comes from the gentleman you'll see in the picture here, and that's Dr. Mitra. And he's a physicist and a computer guy and does this other stuff. But he did one interesting thing a long time ago. He took a computer, an old Windows computer that was in English, and put a mouse, and he went in the slums of India, and he put a hole in the wall, and he literally put this computer in the wall and left it there and watched. And as he did that, he came back 3 months later, and the Indian kids who didn't speak English, had no idea what a bloody computer was or anything else, had figured out how to use it. And it really challenged him to think about how do we do education. And today, Dr. Mitra is not an educational reformer. He's an educational change agent. So let's hear from Dr. Mitra himself for a few seconds in his TED Talk, really about what does he mean and how did we get to the place we are to doing with education.
What is going to be the future of learning? I do have a plan, but in order for me to tell you what that plan is, I need to tell you a little story which kind of sets the stage. I tried to look at where did the kind of learning we do in schools, where did it come from? And, you can look far back into the past, but if you look at present-day schooling the way it is, it's quite easy to figure out where it came from. It came from about 300 years ago. And it came from the last and the biggest of the empires on this planet. Imagine trying to run the show, trying to run the entire planet without computers, without telephones, with data handwritten on pieces of paper and traveling by ships. But the Victorians actually did it. What they did was amazing. They created a global computer made up of people. It's still with us today. It's called the bureaucratic administrative machine. In order to have that machine running, you need lots and lots of people. They made another machine to produce those people. The school. The schools would produce the people who would then become parts of the bureaucratic administrative machine. They must be identical to each other. They must know three things. They must have good handwriting because the data is handwritten. They must be able to read, and they must be able to do multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction in their head. They must be so identical that you could pick one up from New Zealand and ship them to Canada, and he would be instantly functional. The Victorians were great engineers. They engineered a system that was so robust that is still with us today, continuously producing identical people for a machine that no longer exists. The empire's gone. So what are we doing with that design that produces these identical people? And what are we going to do next, if we ever are going to do anything else with it? So that's a pretty strong comment there. I said, schools as we know them now, they're obsolete. I'm not saying they're broken. It's quite fashionable to say that the education system is broken. It's not broken. It's wonderfully constructed. It's just that we don't need it anymore. It's outdated. What's the kind of jobs that we have today? Well, the clerks are the computers. They're there in thousands in every office. And you have people who guide those computers to do their clerical jobs. Those people don't need to be able to write beautifully by hand. They don't need to be able to multiply numbers in their heads. They do need to be able to read. In fact, they need to be able to read discerningly. Well, that's today. But we don't even know what the jobs of the future are going to look like. We know that people will work from wherever they want, whenever they want, in whatever way they want. How is present-day schooling going?
So if what we're doing is not wrong, it's just not needed, what competencies do we need to survive? And how do we need to change how we deliver those competencies, how we deliver the material to develop those competencies, so that as learners we actually thrive over time? So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about how we built the system for something that was needed 300 years ago that's not today, and how we can change that. So let's explore a little bit of competencies. And I really, really like this quote: "The good physician treats the disease. The great physician treats the patient who has the disease." And so the question comes to me, how do we train veterinarians? How do we train our production people to get to the root cause of the issue and not just put a Band-Aid on the problem? We can all think of 100 examples when we had to go out there and we put pigs on antibiotics, which Peter suggested this morning may need to go away. And we put them on antibiotics not because the pigs needed antibiotics, but because we had the environment screwed up, we had the flow screwed up, we had the individual pig care screwed up, that we created a need for an antibiotic that may or may not needed to happen. But again, we hadn't prepared our people to really take that on. And I'm arguing we haven't really trained our veterinarians to take that on. So how do we make veterinarians great? How do we make our production people great? And what does that take, and what does great mean? So the data would say that there's really this concept of what's called Bloom's taxonomy of learning. And so as we go from the bottom to the top of that pyramid, the bottom is really facts. So we go from understanding and remembering facts to understanding facts, to not just being able to regurgitate them, to being able to analyze them, to being able to evaluate them and compare and contrast. And then the highest order of really understanding anything is the ability to create new knowledge. So there's a real stack of learning. And what do we need in this new environment? One, we need the ability to analyze, evaluate, and potentially really create new knowledge as we move through. What do we do today? We focus on remembering facts and maybe trying to understand them in a little bit of analysis. Think about most of the training programs we do, even for production people, right? We focus on what are the facts, what are the things you need to know. Folks, knowing has no value. Information is free. Remember Dr. Google. It's a huge crutch and an issue for veterinary students as we try to teach them, because they also believe that learning stops at the point of remembering. Oh, I don't have to do this because I can look it up in Google and it's okay. Well, if you can look it up in Google, so can anybody else look it up in Google, and so that appears to be a $0 job. That's what we try to tell them. They don't always believe us, but it's practically true. So the question becomes, how do we change the process so we're not focused on this remembering bucket and really focused on moving up the chain? So what do we do today, and what should it be? And I'm going to give some, this is again, strictly in a veterinary context, but go right back to all the points you've had around how do we train production people? What do we do if we're veterinary students today? One, we are really on parts and processes and names of things that go wrong. We are really good at teaching them names of things. What we really need is them to have some robust understanding of these complex biological and pathologic processes. Why is it going wrong, not what is going wrong? That's a big difference, to gain an understanding of why and not what. What do we teach them to do? We teach them to do techniques. My favorite deal talking to veterinary students is they all want to learn how to preg check a cow. And I'm like, why? It's a $12 an hour job. And likely Jose's better at it than you are. So we need them to understand the technique, not do the technique. We need them to have tools to manage and analyze data. And data is everything, right? We always think about data as ones and zeros or numbers, but data is soft data as well, right? Even if I'm a small animal veterinarian, I need to think about how do I really understand and put the radiograph and the MRI and the blood work into context. Not just go, oh, it's this, that, or the other thing. How do I put per serology results into context? What do those things mean? How do I put them within the greater part of the system? I have to have analysis tools, not just tools to go out and gather data, much like Joe talked. We need to understand that, as Angela and Peter and Joe have said this today, that there are many different approaches. A lot of ways to skin a cat. And often multiple ways to skin a cat equal the same answer. But that integrating those societal values, psychological preferences, and process-based approaches are what's absolutely critical for being successful, not that it's yes or no, or that there's a right answer. I think most importantly, we build individual contributors today, whether that's on the production side or whether that's on the veterinary education side. We try to build up individual talents, and we spend very little time focusing on how do we become team leaders, how do I leverage the resources that are underneath me to be more effective. It's a very different set of skills, and it's a skill that we have to build into our students today. And so all that really says, how do we move forward? Well, maybe the better question is, why haven't we done this? Why haven't we gotten off the snide? Well, there's 2 or 3 reasons. Number one, we haven't defined who the customer is. The educational complex today views the customer as the student because the student is the one paying the bill. So when ASV set up this meeting for the next 3 days, guess who they worried about? Oh yeah, they were worried about who is going to come write a check to come to the meeting, right? Well, guess how veterinary schools decide how they're going to build curriculums and if they're being successful? What does the student think of the process? Is the student satisfied? Is the student willing to continue to write a check? Actually, it's pretty logical, folks. It's how they pay their bills. It's how ASV pays its bills. They're short-term focused on what we're doing. My question is, who really is the customer of education, right? At the end of the day, it's our clients that are the customer of us coming to continuing education, and it's us hiring new veterinarians, or it's us having new employees, are really the customers of that training process. But because we pay for that indirectly, it's really hard to understand that. It's also, it's what we're doing. We kind of like what we're doing. Right? We said we don't like change. We really don't like change. We like to stay in our box. Don't make me get out of it. I don't like it. We're comfortable with doing what we're doing. Even if it's crappy, we just keep doing it because, well, I don't know, that's what we did before. And so how do we break that mindset? How do we move down the path? How do we create a better system? So I'm going to suggest that there are 3 keys to this process. Number one, we have to change the learning focus from being a point in time to a lifelong process. And we've talked about that. In swine veterinarians, we're generally pretty good about it, right? You're all here. But we have to think about how do we really build a different set of competencies over our career and not just how many more facts do we engage. So it's lifelong. Time is number one. Number 2, there are radically better methods to teach than what we do today. I would suggest what I am doing right now is a 100% ineffective way to teach. It's horrible. All the data says it's horrible, and I'm going to show you why. What I'm doing right now is a horrible way to teach you, and we'll work around that. And number 3, as Angela alluded to, we've got to start to figure out how to leverage technology. Teaching and technology, teaching methods and technology actually come together quite nicely, and we'll show you an example of that. But I want to argue that those are the 3 keys we've got to fix to actually make our education process better. So how does that look? Well, there's a concept within education that Hardin and Laidlaw have created called the FAIR classroom, or the FAIR teaching method. And that stands on really 4 principles. One is their feedback. So as a learner, am I getting some feedback to know if I've been successful or not? So as I feel around the edges, am I figuring this out? Number 2, is it active? Am I engaged in the process, or am I just sitting here thinking, God, I wish Lowe would shut up so I can go have a beer? That's what veterinary students do, except they sit on Facebook, but it's a similar process. I'm aware I've seen this look before. Okay? Just as importantly, is it individualized for each one of you? Is it the material you need when you need it? Or is it given to you as just, well, you all have to know all this, and if you don't know all this, you're not part of the machine? Remember what Dr. Mitra said. They produced identical clones of a limited set of skills because that was what was needed to run the Victorian computer. We don't need that today. We all need different things to really be in our instant world of mobile and data. How do we move forward? And number 4, which ties into that, is it relevant? Does it apply to our daily lives, and how do we make that happen? So there's lots of ways to get to this. I'm going to give you some examples around teaching veterinary students, because that's what we can talk about easily. We've got a lot of examples of that. We've used every one of these techniques with postgraduate veterinarians, yes, even old people, even real veterinarians, which is what the students like to call it. Oh, real veterinarians are going to learn? Yes, real veterinarians are going to learn. We've used it with producers. We've used it with production managers. The methods work across time and space. They work with little kids. They work with high school kids. They work with adults. We all don't really learn that differently once you get past kind of the basics. And so these methods really apply broadly. These are some veterinary school examples, but I want you to think about how you can use these things when you go home from here. So there are 3 methods. You notice there are 2 co-authors on this paper. Dr. Aldridge, who's my co-conspirator in the clinics, and we teach a lot together, and Dr. Firkins, who put this together. This is really the product of all 3 of us. It's really how the 3 of us together are trying to integrate some of these principles into both postgraduate with Larry and I, and really in classroom education. So please don't think these are all my ideas. This is really a blend of the 3 of us coming up here today. It's also important, Aldridge is British. He's my favorite little pale Englishman. And so it was important when we started talking about the empire that he could relate. So that was a key part of this whole discussion. So the 3 things we're going to talk about are, number 1, the learner-directed classroom. The learner-directed training session, we'll talk about that. Number 2, we're going to talk about a flipped classroom. And number 3, we're going to talk about a blended online format to create some additional learning. So let's go through these fairly quickly. 1, the learner-directed classroom really has the student, for lack of a better word, in charge of what happens that day. It's about pre-learning, that the students have to be prepared when they come to class. You'll see this is a theme. The students are actually going to present the class session. The students are responsible for that. And the focus is not ever on an exam, but the focus is on how do we have a deliverable coming out of that, whether that's a presentation, whether that's a project, etc. They do a lot of this in MBA programs. And so it really focuses on how do we create accountability. It's a big deal, right? The big A. It is exceptionally active. It is project-based, so they have to think and they have to solve a problem. And it certainly follows the see one, do one, teach one method. If you have to teach the class, it might be important that you understand the material. So we actually incorporate all 3 of those and get some repetition to try to drive that in, and it's exceptionally effective. So I'm going to give you an example here. Dr. Firkins teaches a business class at Illinois. If you've not read the book 12, you should all do this. It's really a powerful deal. And so there are 12 elements of great managing if you're not familiar with the book. Each of those elements is a key principle of things that employees need to be successful. So Dr. Firkins has now done this 12 times. And what Larry does is Larry gives pairs of students one of the 12 elements, so an entire chapter that they have to present in class. So they are responsible for coming together. Now, the key points to this are, number one, Larry randomly assigns the groups. He does not just let them buddy up, so they have to work with people they don't want to do. Now we're working on our team-based skills. Number two, they are accountable for presenting it. And three, he shows them what other classes have done in previous years so they can see the examples. Out of the 12 times he's taught this with about 40 students to every class, that's all that fit in the room, he's never had anybody say no. He said there's a lot of grumbling. He said it's like you spill the apple cart when you tell them that they got to work with these other people. But he said at the end of the day, nobody's ever asked to get out. He said it's been fantastic and they've come back. So I'm going to give you one example. So this is the activity around, do you have the tools you need to do your job? And that's the element. And so what these students came up with is they came up with this game, and they made the students play the game in the class. So we have two students do the class session, and they creatively came up with a game to prove where this was. And then they led a 25-minute discussion around how does this apply to their daily careers. I could have trotted up 100 examples of the really super creative things that these students did. And the class has been taught, so if you think about it, element 2 has been taught 12 times. None of the 12 presentations have been the same or even handled the same way. They've had 12 spins on how do you interpret that fact. Fantastic engagement, fantastic learning, really student-directed, and we've got all of our elements of active. Really, really good example. Can be used for production people, i.e., let's talk about how do we castrate and have them come in and present that. The second example in BA, and I use this a lot, and it's called the flipped classroom. It's really good. It takes a lot of work. So what happens here is that we provide students the materials before class. So what you would call lecture when you went to veterinary school is done prior to showing up. The lecturing is all over with. We either do that on video or we'll give them papers to read, but they're responsible for the materials. We actually will test their readiness. We'll talk about how we do this. Then we're going to go through an application exercise during class. So class with the professor really becomes facilitation, not an expert dump. So instead of, if you look down there in the bottom right-hand corner, right, instead of saying we're going to have class and then study, we actually ask them to study before they come to class. As an instructor, it's fantastic because they actually might know what they talk about. They are accountable, active, case-based, and again, we're working on building their team building and competence. So what does that look like? So what happens is before they come to class, there's preparation, that's individual study. When they show up in the door, they get a quiz. That quiz is broken into really two parts. Number one, they do the quiz individually. They turn that in. That's what their grade is. Well, part of their grade. They then break up into their project groups and they take that quiz. They take the quiz again as a group. That's part of their grade. Then we go through the questions that don't work. What didn't they understand? We do this all electronically so we can get it back very quickly, right? We can tally these and move forward. We have given them an assessment of what did they know before we ever started a discussion. Think about how many exams you took that you never know what the right answer is. They know the right answer immediately. Then we have a discussion about those things. Okay? So that's really about testing for facts. We worked on the lowest order of Bloom's taxonomy immediately. Do they remember what the facts are? Then we ask them to apply those facts. So we may give them a case to do. We may have a test to work through. These are often multiple guess questions that are often misleading very intentionally. There's maybe 3 right answers so they can get in a fight in class and discuss with each other. The interaction and self-learning that goes on between the two students is fantastic. And we really work at the high end of Bloom's taxonomy in this. It's not easy because we have to think the entire class period. It's not standing up there regurgitating. But it's a fantastic way to teach. And I will tell you right now, it works really, really well with production guys. We've done it, and it's fantastic. So I want to just go through we've got one of these students who did it. So if you could pop the video for me here.
Two things that really stuck with me from this past quarter in food animal. So one of the things that really stuck with me was Dr. Lowe's take on disease management process. Had 5 steps. The first one was to identify the goal, whether you want to control or eliminate the disease or just let it run its course. Any one of those. Second step was to figure out the current status of the herd. Obviously, you would need to know that for treatment or future prognosis or prevention. The third step was identify any constraints that you may have, such as on-farm, being able to implement a plan, housing situations that may prevent you from doing a certain treatment or something like that. So then after you figure out those, then that's when you develop your plan, because you can't just automatically jump in and say, you got to treat all these animals with this antibiotic, because it may not be feasible for the farm, cost-wise, disease-wise, or management-wise.
So what you can hear from Mara there is, right, she's taken we never actually gave them that directly, that material. We gave it to them in pieces and asked them to assemble that in some case utilization. And so she's taken a whole bunch of facts and said, how do I apply that to a case and not come out of there with a series of crazy ideas, but a set of her own ideas to synthesize and move forward and really be able to problem solve, working again at the analyze and evaluate level of Bloom's taxonomy. That's actually an exercise we force all of our students to do. It's the final exam in every one of our classes. We teach on a quarter basis. We ask them to dictate a 2-minute video explaining 2 things they learned in the class, and explain them to us. Don't tell it to us about it. They're absolutely fascinating to understand their learning at a deep level, and it's actually helped us learn very, very effectively about what's working and what's not working, what have we been good at teaching and what have we not been good at teaching. I would also argue you can do that with your producers, you can do that with your staff, you can do that with about anybody. Just have them put it on their iPhone. Everybody's got an iPhone. They just do it on she did that on her iPhone, shot me the video, life's good, and we move on. Takes about 2 minutes, but it's really an effective way to move forward. So I said the other piece was technology, and how do we move that? If you've not heard of these massive open online courses, Coursera is a popular platform for that. These are free educational opportunities that are designed really to allow education to reach anyone in the world. So they are completely self-directed. They're a bit individualized. There's a lot of peer-to-peer feedback. They're free. They're not low cost. They are free. They're in some respects low cost to develop. It might cost $100,000 or something to develop a course, but that course can be taught over and over and over again with a lot of people. So when I say a massive open online course, what do I mean? They are massive. This is the course we're doing right now. There's 6,600 people in the class. 97 of them have said, we want a certificate out of this. And if you look on the right-hand panel, you'll notice that they're from all over the world. That's pretty exciting for us, right? The ability to have people interact with each other from all over the world on a topic, right, that they all find interesting. So they've asked to do that, and they move forward. So how do we work through the FAIR principles with this MOOC, and do we really get that? So how do we drive individualized and relevant? We've done that really through these videos. And if you'll notice a lot of online learning is you're all going, oh my God, it's online education. Don't make me do that and watch that lecture. Because they're brutal, right? It's the professor standing in front of the room, reading from the podium with the slides in the background like this in a monotone. I've tried to do 3 of these classes myself, and I've not made it past the 3rd lecture. Shoot me now. So we challenged our audio-video group when we put this together, and they are incredibly talented human beings who make us look much better than what we are. But Colleen has really put this material together for us, and Grant. And they've said, we're going to be creative. And they said, we want to do these things that make you more engaged in the process. So I want to show you a little example about how these online videos can be used, not in a although we use plenty of those, but how do we do it in a flexible, really individualized and engaging process to make it relevant. So
my name's Dr. Brian Aldridge from the University of Illinois College of Veterinary Medicine. I'm a livestock veterinarian here at the university, and I'm one of the instructors on the course, which is looking at sustainable food production through livestock management.
So I'm Jim Lowe, and we're standing here today in the middle of this oat field. And you ask, why are we standing in an oat field? Isn't this a class about animal agriculture and sustainability? Well, as we think about animal ag and we think about how do we feed the world, these oats that I'm standing in and all their other plant brethren are really where it all starts.
During this course, we'll be looking at different aspects of livestock management, how animals deal with nutrients, how they grow, and also how we can develop systems which can optimize their health by good management practices. So we're here today, and if you noticed, it's cold, it's snowing, it's about freezing, about 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees centigrade, and we're looking at how these calves cope with those kind of conditions. And as you can see, this animal is showing great behavior. It's a jumping and fun-filled calf. Why? Because its management is optimized to cope with the environment that it's in. Its nutrition is optimized to feed it all of the nutrients it needs to cope with the changing weather.
We've talked about sustainability. We've talked about why do we raise animals, and these really beautiful calves here standing next to us during their feeding period. But how do we assess the economics, and how do we manage a business to make a determination of how we make decisions in agriculture?
Livestock production systems around the world are completely different, so we're really interested in hearing from you in your country and in your particular environment as to how animals are kept and some of the management systems that have been developed to see how you and other people that you know have used management systems to optimize livestock production so that healthy food is produced from those animals.
We're limited by the amount of land we have and the total land mass we've got. So how do we use our one and greatest limiting resource, which is land, in a manner that produces the most good for the most people over the longest period of time? Thank you, and we look forward to the rest of the course. So besides shameless self-promotion, I wanted to really show you that by using some really creative people that we don't normally have in our lives, right? I don't get to hang out with these video people all the time. They pushed us to places educationally that I would have never gone. They asked us to questions that you would all look at them like I did and go, really? You want to know that? Like, that doesn't make sense. What are you talking about? Why are you teaching that way? You haven't told me a story. That we can pull in outside professionals, and these are structures to help do that, to really make our material better, more effective, more engaging, and more relevant. So the other half of the FAIR principle is feedback and accountability, and how do we make that, or feedback and active. These MOOC classes actually have very active discussion sessions on them. You'll notice they ask questions. We post some questions as the instructor. They post these questions from all over the world. They're quite interesting. As you can imagine, on a case on sustainability through disease management, there have been several wackaloons on there. I may have called them that on feedback and a discussion board, but that's just the way it is. So they're all the people that we would call the antis, right? We had a chance to engage with. Don't know if that's good or bad. But it was engagement that allowed some of their other classmates on this to really put the foot down and say, really? What are you really thinking? And so there was really learning and exchange that occurred there that probably wouldn't have happened if the expert had stood up and put the foot down. So we're not sure that MOOCs actually, or online education, actually gets us much. We do struggle with creating relevance, and we do struggle with really creating that active learning that we'd like to see. So we've taken this to the next step and said, how do we take online learning, or any kind of an online class, and make that effective at the level of the classroom? And so we flipped it. So we asked the students to do the MOOC during the week, and then they have to come to class prepared with questions. And so we facilitate for an hour as the groups discuss what their key topics of the week were. So if you look on here, and then realize this is a bit hard to see, but this is actually the list from 2 weeks ago. The topics were, they want to know about management of neonates, and what do we do, and why were they in the cold? And then number 2, how do we communicate that to the public? Second, they want to know what's the normal birth behavior. So we had an opportunity to go through in every species, how does normal birth behavior occur, and feed them extra material. 3, they were very interested in the microbiota. We tried to gloss over that because they actually knew more about microbes than we did because they were just taking microbiology. We don't like to really admit that we really don't have all the facts on top of our head. They ask about antibiotic use. They ask about rumen development. We had a student actually come in and pull all the materials together on how do calves do rumen development and what do we do. We talked about colostrum management. We talked about how do you manage unthrifty calves. They brought the topics to us. It's not only effective, but think about how effective it would be if we came to this meeting with the lecture taped. You'd heard me for 40 minutes, and you do these in about 10-minute segments. You had 4 10-minute segments, so you don't have to listen to me for 40 continuous minutes, because God knows no one really wants to do that. And they get that, and you come in, and then you had 2 hours to pepper me with questions. What are you saying? What are you talking about? We're going to try to do that for 45 minutes. But what if the entire ASV meeting was that way? What if you came for a day and you had the opportunity to interact with the authors for an hour? And I believe I'm not quite that old. I mean, I'm not as old as Wetzel, but I'm getting close. That's how ASV used to be. There was a lot of questions. And so how do we rechange our own continuing education around to make it more effective, more interactive, and more productive? So in wrap up here, Brian, if you want to stand up, to get some exercise. I don't know if Joe gave you enough today or not. I was trying to through that. But I really think we have to talk about the who, what, when, where, and how. We have to think about how we change our training of our vets, our caregivers, and basically everybody we interact with, including undergraduate education. What do we need to do? We've got to be working at the higher level of Bloom's taxonomy. That has to occur over our own lifetimes. That can't be just I get through vet school and I'm done. And I know we all don't recognize that, but I think some of our veterinary students think they're done when they get through vet school. Where does it occur? It really can occur everywhere, and it has to occur all the time because of, right? I don't have my phone in my pocket, but we live on our phones today, folks, right? Particularly the younger generation. So we have to make that learning available when people need it so that it's relevant, and how it's got to be. We have to have feedback. It has to be active. It has to be individualized, and it has to be realistic. It has to be relevant, excuse me. We've got to drive those forward. And so what does that look like over a lifetime? Well, this is my envision of where we would be at if we built the ideal training system. And so from the upper left to the bottom right is really our progressions over a veterinary career. So when we deal with freshmen, we'd like for them to have some remembering and some understanding. And the understanding just might be that when they come to class as second years, they don't look at you and go, well, that was last year. I don't have to know that. Okay, we can remember and understand that might fit in some context. By the time they graduate, I want to have some analytical and evaluation skills, but remembering they still may not have a lot of facts completely that we're all going to have as we gain experience, right? And so as we progress through our career, right, we move farther up Bloom's taxonomy of really understanding things. And we do that today primarily through experience, right? How do we move up the relevance chain? We move up there because we learned the hard way. We all bloodied our noses. That's why we're still in this. I'm challenging all of us today, how do we make that better? I'm in the next to the right box of 20 years out. How do I find the 10-year and 5-year out veterinarians to help mentor them? How do those of you that have been out of school 4 or 5 years, how do you find the new grads and help mentor them? How do we all build a system that builds lifelong learning into the process, whether that's informal education, informal education, mentoring, and how do we support our veterinary colleges really to help change their mindset? That's what I have today. I appreciate all of your time, and it'll be a beverage soon.